stage is set. Victor Wembanyama and the San Antonio Spurs taking on Jalen Brunson and the New York Knicks for a chance to go down in history. A 7'5" alien that plays point guard, shoots threes, dominant defensive force, maybe the best defender we've ever seen. And then a 6'1", 6'2" small guard that has carried this team on the most dominant 11-game stretch in sports history. What an epic 7-game battle we have coming up on Wednesday with Game 1. But before we even preview this series and I give my final predictions, which at the start of recording this, I don't know who I'm going to pick. I'm going to make up my mind while I'm recording this. It's just that close to me. But we do have to take a step back and look at how these two teams got there. And for the Knicks, after going down 2-1 in the series to the Atlanta Hawks, they looked like this team could be going out in the first round. And since then, they have just obliterated opponents. 51-point closeout games, 30-point closeout games. They've had an average margin of victory in closeout games of 33 points. A sweep of the Philadelphia 76ers, who were fresh off of a Game 7 and a agonizing defeat for me in the Celtics. Then sweeping James Harden and Donovan Mitchell and the Cleveland Cavaliers to go to the NBA Finals for the first time since 1999. And for the Spurs, they battling up and down all season against the Oklahoma City Thunder, a team that nobody thought would be this good with how young some of these stars are for the Spurs. Wemby, just 23 years old. Dylan Harper, a rookie, playing valuable playoff minutes. Maybe the deciding factor for the Spurs in that Game 7. And listen, the Thunder, they were missing a lot of their ball handling help in a AJ Mitchell, in a Jalen Williams. SGA had a lot on his table. But given those circumstances, this Spurs team showed up and just battled a physical series. All the controversy around flopping, around Wemby telling his team to make hard, reckless fouls on Thunder players, right? All the drama that took away from the actual watchability of this series. After that Game 1 overtime where Wemby had 40 points and a career high in minutes, to these back-to-back blowouts at home for both the Spurs and the Thunder, to a Game 7 where we finally got a close game and the stars showed out and Wemby, it wasn't maybe the greatest game. It took a Luke Cornett block to save the game when Wemby was in foul trouble. But here we are, two teams, a 1999 Finals rematch, an NBA Cup rematch for the first time this season. We have an epic series going on right now. And listen, I have no idea who's going to win this series. Jalen Brunson and the Knicks, they've had the best offense in the league these playoffs. But then you have Wemby on the other side, who is 7'5" and can do anything he wants on the floor. It seems like the moment is not too big for the Spurs with all their young guys. We just saw it in a Game 7 against the reigning champs. Nothing is too big for these guys. And that's why I think this series, is going 7 games. I really do. I don't know who's going to win. The injury to Mitchell Robinson, that could play a factor, right? And obviously he's the backup center for the Knicks, and you can say what you want about that, but we saw what Luke Cornett did in that Game 7, right? Maybe they're not the most important player on the floor, but there's going to be a moment where you need every single player on the roster to step up and make a play to win you a game. And the margins are so close in these series that any mistake or any costly mistake that causes you to lose a game or even a possession maybe could cost you the series. And basically, not only life and career resume stakes on the table here, but maybe league and rules changes coming because of this series as well. Tons of things that are on the table with a series that I think is going to be, when the TV ratings come out after the playoffs are done, after the NBA Finals is over, this is going to be the most watched NBA Finals in NBA history. It's just going to be that great of a rock fight. I'm going to go more in depth, preview this series in just a second. But before we even dive into what's at stake in this series, I want to take a quick look and give my thoughts on the new lottery system that was confirmed last week via a vote. 29 owners voting yes, one voter in the Memphis Grizzlies voting no. But for those of you who don't know, it's basically a 3-2-1 system where 3 balls in the lottery machine are given to the bottom 4 through 10 teams. So those 4 through 10 teams get 3 chances at a number 1 pick. 2 balls for the bottom 3 teams. So the 3 biggest tankers, or the 3 worst teams in the NBA, however you want to look at it, depends on the year. Those teams getting 2 balls, and then 2 balls for a play-in team, and 1 ball for the 7 and 8 play-in losers, right? My first thoughts on this are, obviously something had to be done because half the league almost was taken this year. It was a miserable watch if you were watching, every game from a just love of the game standpoint, to watch these teams put out, entire lineups of rookies, or entire lineups of G League players, or entire lineups of one position, sometimes a lot of guards. It was a terrible watch. For the average NBA fan, you're just watching your team, or you're just watching the heavyweight matchups, the playoffs. You don't see what was going on behind the scenes for an entire season. And I understand that. Something had to be done, though. It just did, because teams were just completely forfeiting matches. We had teams going into the season back in June after the draft saying this was going to be the year that we try and lose as many games as possible. We had teams pre-booking a plane to Cancun in June. We can't have that for parity in the league. We just cannot have teams trying to screw up their season for a chance at a number 1 pick. That being said, I really wanted to see some sort of way to incentivize winning. And this system doesn't incentivize winning. It disincentivizes losing, and you may say, right, that's sort of the same thing. But no, it's really not. Teams are still going to be losing games. There's going to be a free-for-all, a battle at the end of the season to try and win games, to get out of those bottom 3 spots so that you have that 1 extra ball, right? So there's going to be winning at the end of the season, right? But that doesn't really matter, right? You want teams competing for the entire season. You're not going to have teams competing because you can still lose games, right? You're still going to try and be a 5 through 7, 5 through 8 team in terms of worst, right? You're still going to try and be a bottom 5 through 7 team to get your chances of getting a number 1 overall pick, right? They're still going to be losing, but you're going to get rid of teams that are trying to lose from all the way back in June. You're going to get rid of those teams that have already made up their mind on how the season is going to go, right? You want teams, if they're going to be drafting or at least tanking for a number 1 overall pick, you want that to be a mid-season decision after injuries, after your season's gone wrong, right? You don't want that to be the notion coming into the season. That makes for terrible watch for your teams. That makes for terrible, marketing for the NBA. We had the Washington Wizards and the Utah Jazz that did a great job this year of getting some draft picks, but also training for star players and improving their roster so that next year they can get out of this system. But we're still going to have teams like the Sacramento Kings, possibly the New Orleans Pelicans, that need a draft pick, especially after how this lottery went for them. But now, we're not going to get those teams doing that. Now, they're still going to be bad, but they're going to be trying to win because it doesn't make any sense for them to try and lose games right off the bat. Now, they're going to lose a lot of games. Those are probably the two worst teams in the league. Maybe not the Pelicans. The Pelicans have a lot of talent if Zion Williamson is able to stay healthy, but most definitely the Kings. So, what does this mean? It means that the Celtics are going to have a harder time trading for maybe it's a Giannis or maybe it's something else because you don't know now how those draft picks that you'll be giving up or getting back potentially depending on the trades, right? You don't know how those draft picks are going to end up, right? You knew before that there was a certain spot that they would land or a good percentage that they would be a bottom 5, a bottom 10, whatever it means, right? You knew a certain chance that they would land in this spot when you're trading. But now you have no idea because there's such a wide range from 4 all the way up to 12 where you could get 2 balls and have a chance of getting the number 1 overall pick, right? You don't know where those teams are going to land. It's so random now. This system has not only has it, disincentivized tanking, but it's almost completely flattened the odds with teams only have an 8% chance now of getting the number 1 overall pick, and teams that, are the biggest losers, the bottom 3 teams, have even less of a chance. So you try and go out and trade for Giannis and they ask for picks. What are those picks? Especially if it's a Celtics team that is usually competitive. Now, it could be that Celtics have a bad season and they're in the play-in and you have a chance of getting the number 1 overall pick. But more than likely, they'll be out of the lottery, right? So you don't, if you're a Celtics fan, and I'm not saying I want to trade for Giannis. We've already done plenty of talk on that, and I've given my opinions. You can go check those out. But if they were to do that, what do the Bucks want back or another team? Are they asking for players over draft picks? And that really hurts the Celtics. We don't want to be trading away our young assets or even a Derek White, right? We don't want to be trading away those guys, right? There's going to be one guy, maybe Jalen Brown. You don't want to have to trade away multiple guys, especially as you try and build up the depth around what's going to be a really top-heavy salary team if you go and trade for a Giannis. It already is a top-heavy team with Jalen Brown and Jason Tatum. Draft picks might not be available to give up, though, because teams don't want that. They don't know where they're going to land. It's going to make it really hard to do trades out into the future. I think there's going to be, teams are not going to trade for draft picks that are more than 2 or 3 years out, right? And that makes it really hard to try and keep your draft picks and continue to build on a young championship core growing up. It's going to be really hard to do that if you're any team, right? And I really think, I don't know if it's like Adam Silver really loves the relegation, what we see in soccer in Europe and whatever, right? It's not really a relegation because you can't relegate teams to the G League. You just can't do that. But the hurting of these bottom 3 teams is sort of like a relegation. That's what people are calling it. And to be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of this system. It's really confusing on where picks land. Another thing that is sort of completely separate from this system, but Adam Silver now has almost complete control on what he can do to teams. if you are found tanking in the season, he can take away picks. He can, hurt where you're drafting. He can sort of slot you into a bad drafting order. Owners have now given Adam Silver almost complete control over their teams, right? And I think part of the reason why owners signed off on this is because it's going to force teams to be really careful about their salary cap and how they manage their players' salaries and all of that, their roster, and that's going to keep costs down for the most part. That's why I think owners voted off on this, but I don't think they paid enough attention to what Adam Silver can now do. The second round of the draft is now going to be this like reverse order of the first round draft, sort of like a snake draft, which is kind of weird. But then Adam Silver has the ability to move teams around out of order based on what they do in the regular season, or sort of like if he feels like it, right? If he finds that you're tanking in the regular season despite all these new reasons not to tank, is he now going to go and penalize your team? That's kind of scary to have a commissioner that can now do that, and I don't expect him to do that, right? There are lots of controversies on Adam Silver. Personally, I think he's done an okay job of trying to implement some new things into the league, trying to get some excitement up, trying to stop what has been a bad watch for the last 2 seasons in particular, right? This tanking, and everybody's over exaggerating to this season, obviously, because of how good the draft is, right? It's gonna go down the next season, right? But something still has to be done because it's always been a problem, right? And you can't just get rid of the lottery completely. You have to at least try and incentivize winning. And this is not the perfect solution. It's a sunset whatever rule, so they're gonna evaluate it for 3 years and then they'll reassess. And there might be tweaks. They might keep it. They might scrap it completely. We'll give it some time to see how it plays out. It's not going into effect for this draft. It'll start for next draft, but it does mean the teams are going to have to rethink about how they trade draft picks on draft night, Giannis deal, maybe all of that stuff. It's going to impact the Celtics and how they go about their business for the next couple of seasons. All right, let's get back to the more exciting topics. New York Knicks, San Antonio Spurs, NBA Finals, $5,000 nosebleed seats in Madison Square Garden. A ridiculous price. It's cheaper to buy a ticket, a plane ticket I mean, get a hotel for a night or two, and get a ticket to the game in San Antonio than it is just to live in New York City and go to the game. Just a ridiculous, astronomical price. But I guess Wemby is from outer space. That being said, who is going to win this series? And for the Spurs, if they want to win this series, obviously Jalen Brunson and Wemby have to be great. Take those two guys out of the equation. The Spurs need their three-point shooting, which has been a valuable asset, especially against the Thunder. It has to continue from a lot of their young guys that we saw what they did in the Western Conference Finals. But the NBA Finals are a whole step up. Can Dylan Harper continue to attack off the dribble and get shots against a very talented, when they're playing well, in the New York Knicks, their defense? Jalen Brunson is an underrated defender, right? He gives an effort on the defensive end, very similar to a Steph Curry, where maybe he's not the most talented. Obviously, he's a small guard, but he puts his body on the line. He draws charges. He tries to stay in front of guys. It's going to be hard to go at Jalen Brunson, and that's who the Spurs are going to try and attack, and they're going to be disappointed a lot of the time. But it's also going to be a Stephon Castle in his second year. Can he make corner threes? Can Julian Champagnie come in off the bench and just knock down, a couple threes, right? He was fantastic in Game 7. I think he went 5 of 11 from 3. It was really the game-opening, breaking player for the Spurs. He was fantastic. But you're going to need shooting from Devin Vassell, right? All these guys, right? The Spurs are not necessarily a great three-point shooting team. They were fantastic in the Western Conference Finals, and ultimately, I think one of the biggest reasons why they won was because they were able to generate great three-point shooting compared to poor attempts from Alex Caruso or Lou Dort or even a Cason Wallace, right? That being said, the Spurs will also have to make Jalen Brunson work, right? Jalen Brunson cannot get easy buckets where he's not exerting lots of energy, right? That allows him to stay more locked in, to play harder on the defensive end. You have to tire him out, right? There's already going to be a a minutes restriction, or not, I shouldn't say minutes restriction, a minutes difference between what Jalen Brunson is going to play and what Wemby's going to play, right? Wemby is a 7'5 center. Jalen Brunson is a 6'1, 6'2 guard. It's a lot easier for Jalen Brunson to move up and down the floor, to get to his spots, to get his shots, to, not tire himself out than it is for Wemby to do that, right? Wemby will be out of breath just running up and down the floor a bunch of times, right? And Wemby's in shape. I'm not saying he's out of shape or anything like that, right? But it's going to be hard for him to play 40 minutes a night. That's probably what Jalen Brunson is going to play in the finals. Wemby's going to try and play 35, 38 minutes a night, but it's going to be hard. So can you make Jalen Brunson at least have to think about getting breaks if you're Mike Brown? Can you try and even the minutes disparity between those two players, right? But then for the Knicks, you have to attack the Spurs guards. You got to get their rookies and their very young players to feel that inexperience, to feel that pressure of an NBA Finals, right? And the Thunder weren't able to do it, so I don't know if the Knicks will be able to do it. Now, the Knicks are going to have more players that can attack off the dribble than the Thunder did, right? It's going to be, you can get a Josh Hart, you could get a Mikal Bridges, you can get a OG Anunoby, Jalen Brunson, right? All those guys can do a better job of handling the ball compared to just SGA for the Thunder, right? So it's going to be a more challenging defensive game. I really do think, right? SGA is better than Brunson, right? They are pretty similar guards, actually. They play very much the same style. I think Jalen Brunson's a little bit better of a three-point shooter, and he'll take more threes, but they are very similar. These are very similar built teams. But that being said, right, besides Jalen Brunson, there's a lot more ball handling, especially in the starting lineup, than the Thunder had, right? And the Thunder played two centers who were not handling the ball, right? So that's going to be a big challenge for the Spurs to try and guard Jalen Brunson and Mikal Bridges, who's been on fire as of late. Backdoor cuts were huge for the Knicks in the Eastern Conference Finals. The Spurs cannot lose track of a Josh Hart or a Mikal Bridges cutting off the ball. They're going to get torn to pieces if they do that on the back line. Easy dunks, right? Biggest difference is if a team can get easy shots, easy points, open threes, and they're not working hard to do it, it allows them to lock in, set their defense on the defensive end, and makes it twice as hard for an offense to go at them. The difference is, can you attack in transition before Wemby gets back to protect the rim? And can you get open shots if you're the Spurs, going at Jalen Brunson, forcing him to tire himself out, have to take breaks? It's going to be a rock fight. I really don't know where I'm going to go with this. And I said at the top of the show that I was making up my mind as I am recording this. And I think I've come to a conclusion. I said Thunder in 6 in the last series, and I was wrong. I thought that the Thunder were going to be able to close it out on the road. Wemby has a monster performance. They come back and win. And here's what I'm going to say here. I'm going to say Game 7, the New York Knicks will win the NBA championship. It's going to be Jalen Brunson MVP. First time since 1973, I believe. Maybe 1974. I wasn't alive. 1999, the first time since they were in the NBA Finals. They're going to get it done. And the San Antonio Spurs will come this close to defying the odds of a team without this experience, and they're going to be the the top of the league for years to come as long as Wemby's healthy. OKC and the Spurs are going to be battling it out for years to come. But I think the Knicks are going to get it done for the city of New York. And as much as it pains me to say this, because I'm rooting for the Spurs, you know I am, as a Celtics fan. In a couple years, right? Let's say the Spurs do win and they keep winning, right? In a couple years, teams will be looking at how they looked at Tom Brady and the Patriots, and they're frustrated and annoyed with how this team keeps winning and some of these scandals going around, right? That might be the case. But right now, with Wemby being one of the nicest players, at least in the press conference and media room, he's not that on the court, it seems, but he's just a fantastic, super talented, super smart player to watch. I'm rooting for the Spurs with technically no rooting interest, right? That's who I'm rooting for. But I think the Knicks are going to get it done in 7. And I hope I'm wrong. I hope the Spurs can get it done. We're going to be live for Game 1 on this channel. We're going to be live for Game 2 on my other channel. I will leave the link to this game, or to Game 1 and to my other channel, in the description as well. So stay tuned for that. We will have a live reaction after the game as well. So stay tuned for that. We're going to have shows on the off days as well. Any Celtics news, will be going over that as well. A Giannis trade maybe. So all of that coming on in the NBA Finals. Wednesday, 8:20, we'll be live. It's an 8:30 game. Tune in. And until next time, go Spurs, go Celtics, and I can't wait for this epic 7-game battle.
Action.